I never thought revenge would taste like expensive coffee and feel like tailored suits against my skin. But there I was, 26 years old, walking through the glass doors of Blackwood Corporation with my new employee badge clipped to my jacket and murder in my heart. Well, not literal murder, but close enough. My name is Natalie Chen, and exactly 2 years ago my father put a gun to his head in our garage. The note he left was short. I'm sorry. I couldn't fight them anymore. Take care of your mother. The them he referred to was Blackwood Corporation, specifically the ruthless business empire that had crushed his small manufacturing company, stolen his patents, and buried him in lawsuits until he had nothing left. Not his business, not his savings, not even his will to live. I found him. I was the one who heard the shot. I was the one who opened that garage door and saw what desperation looks like when it finally wins. So yeah, I had a score to settle. It took me 2 years to set up this moment. 2 years of planning, preparing, and transforming myself from a grieving daughter into someone who could walk into the lion's den without flinching. I got my MBA. I practiced my smile in the mirror until it looked genuine. I buried Natalie the daughter and became Natalie the ambitious professional who wanted nothing more than to climb the corporate ladder. And now, here I was about to start my first day as the executive assistant to Alexander Blackwood himself, the CEO, the face of the company, the man whose signature was on every document that destroyed my father. Miss Chen, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an efficient demeanor, approached me in the lobby. I'm Margaret Wells, Mr. Blackwood's Senior Administrative Coordinator. Welcome to Blackwood Corporation. Thank you, I said, shaking her hand with just the right amount of firmness. Not too eager, not too weak. I'm excited to be here. Margaret led me through the building, explaining policies and procedures in a crisp, no-nonsense tone. The headquarters was everything you'd expect from a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Marble floors, modern art on the walls, floor-to-ceiling windows that made you feel like you were floating above the city. My father's factory had concrete floors and fluorescent lights that flickered. The contrast wasn't lost on me. Mr. Blackwood is very particular about his schedule, Margaret was saying as we rode the elevator to the top floor. He expects punctuality, discretion, and absolute loyalty. Your predecessor lasted 3 months before she cracked under the pressure. I don't crack easily, I said. Margaret gave me a look that might have been approval. We'll see. The executive floor was quieter than the rest of the building, all hushed voices and expensive carpet. Margaret walked me past several closed doors before stopping at a large office suite. She knocked twice and opened the door without waiting for a response. Mr. Blackwood, your new assistant is here. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was the moment I'd been preparing for. The moment I'd face the man who killed my father. I stepped inside. The office was massive, with windows overlooking the entire city. But I barely noticed the view because my attention was fixed on the man standing behind the desk. Alexander Blackwood was not what I expected. I'd seen photos, of course. Done my research. But pictures didn't capture the way he commanded a room just by standing in it. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that was just slightly too long to be corporate standard. His suit was impeccable, but he wore it like he didn't care about it, like it was just another thing he had to put on in the morning. But it was his eyes that threw me. They were gray, storm cloud gray, and they were tired, really tired, like he hadn't slept well in years. Miss Chen. He came around the desk and extended his hand. Welcome. I shook it, keeping my face neutral even though touching him felt like touching a live wire. Thank you, Mr. Blackwood. I'm looking forward to working with you. Are you? He tilted his head slightly, studying me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Most people are terrified on their first day. You seem remarkably calm. I don't see any reason to be terrified, I said. It's just a job. Something flickered across his face, amusement maybe, or curiosity. Just a job, he repeated. I like that. Margaret, thank you. I'll take it from here. Margaret nodded and left, closing the door behind her. Suddenly, the massive office felt very small. Sit, Alexander said, gesturing to one of the chairs in front of his desk. Let's talk about what I expect from you. I sat, crossing my legs and pulling out my tablet to take notes. Professional, efficient, exactly what an executive assistant should be. I need someone I can trust, he began, leaning against his desk instead of sitting behind it, Someone who can anticipate problems before they become disasters. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when I'm making a mistake. Can you do that? Yes, I said without hesitation. My schedule is brutal. 18-hour days are common. I'll need you available nights and weekends sometimes. Your personal life will suffer. Are you okay with that? I thought about my mother in her small apartment, medicated and quiet, barely functioning 2 years after my father's death. I thought about my empty apartment and emptier social calendar. I'd already sacrificed my personal life for this mission. I'm okay with that, I said. He studied me again with those unsettling gray eyes. Why do you want this job, Natalie? And don't give me the rehearsed answer from your interview. The real reason, my pulse quickened. This was dangerous territory. But I'd prepared for this too, honestly, I said. I want to learn from the best. Blackwood Corporation didn't become an industry leader by playing it safe. I want to understand how you think, how you make decisions. I want to be more than just an assistant. I want to be someone who actually understands business at this level. It was a good answer. Ambitious but not threatening. Flattering but not fake. Alexander nodded slowly. Fair enough. He pushed off the desk and went to the window, hands in his pockets. Let me tell you what this job really is, Natalie. It's not glamorous. You'll be managing 1,000 small crises a day while I deal with the big ones. You'll hear things that would make most people lose faith in humanity. You'll see how power really works, and it's not pretty. He turned back to face me. You'll also become a target. There are people in this company, including members of my own family, who would love nothing more than to see me fail. If they think you're important to me, they'll try to use you. They'll threaten you, bribe you, or try to turn you against me. I can handle it, I said. Can you? He walked back toward me, stopping a few feet away. Because once you're in this world, Natalie, it's very hard to get out with your soul intact. There was something in his voice, a warning that felt almost personal. Like he was trying to protect me from something, from him, from the job. From the company? I stood up, meeting his eyes directly. Mr. Blackwood, I appreciate your concern, but I know what I'm signing up for. I'm not as fragile as you think. He smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed his entire face. No, he said softly. I don't think you're fragile at all. That first week was a baptism by fire. Alexander wasn't kidding about the brutal schedule. We started at 6 in the morning and rarely finished before 8 at night. He was constantly in meetings with investors, board members, department heads, lawyers, politicians. My job was to keep it all organized, anticipate what he needed before he asked, and make sure nothing fell through the cracks. I was good at it. Really good. Maybe too good. How did you know I needed these files? He asked on the third day, looking at the folder I'd placed on his desk before a meeting with the legal team. The meeting agenda mentioned the Riverside merger, I said. These are the updated due diligence reports from last week. I assumed you'd want them handy. He stared at me for a moment. My last assistant would have waited for me to ask. I'm not your last assistant. Another one of those smiles. No, you're definitely not. But while I was playing the perfect assistant by day, I was playing detective by night. I'd installed keylogger software on my work computer. Risky but necessary. I made copies of documents when I could. I paid attention to names, patterns, anything that might give me evidence of the corporate crimes I was sure were happening. The problem was, I wasn't finding what I expected. Alexander Blackwood was demanding, intense and occasionally ruthless in negotiations. But he wasn't the villain I'd imagined. He worked harder than anyone else in the building. He knew his employees' names, asked about their families, and actually listened to their concerns. When a department head suggested cutting benefits to increase profit margins, Alexander shot it down immediately. We don't build this company by destroying the people who work here, he'd said. Find another way. It was confusing, frustrating. This wasn't the monster who'd driven my father to suicide, so where was the monster? The answer came during a board meeting 3 weeks into my job. I wasn't supposed to be in board meetings, but Alexander had asked me to sit in to take notes, saying his usual stenographer was out sick. I sat in the corner with my laptop, trying to be invisible while 12 of the most powerful people in the company argued about quarterly projections. That's when I saw him, Richard Blackwood, Alexander's father, the chairman of the board. He was in his 70s but still commanded respect, or maybe it was fear, from everyone in the room. He had the same gray eyes as Alexander, but his were cold, calculating. When he spoke, people listened. "The manufacturing sector is underperforming," Richard said, pulling up a presentation on the screen. "We need to be more aggressive about acquiring smaller competitors. There's a list of 23 companies we've identified as targets." My hands froze on the keyboard. "Some of these companies have been around for decades," Alexander said, studying the list. "Family businesses. We're talking about people's lives." "We're talking about business," Richard corrected coldly. "Sentiment doesn't pay dividends, Alexander. We identify inefficiency, we acquire it, we optimize it. That's how we stay on top. By destroying people's livelihoods? By being smarter than them." Richard's smile was sharp. "If they can't compete, they don't deserve to survive. It's evolution." I felt sick. This was it. This was the philosophy that had killed my father. Not Alexander's philosophy, his father's. The meeting continued, but I barely heard it. My mind was racing. I'd been targeting the wrong Blackwood. After the meeting, I was packing up my laptop when Richard approached me. Up close, he was even more intimidating. "You're new," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, sir. I'm Mr. Blackwood's assistant." "Ah." His eyes swept over me, assessing. "My son has good taste. You're much prettier than the last one." The casual sexism made my skin crawl, but I smiled politely. "Thank you, sir." "Tell me, dear, how are you finding the work? Is my son treating you well?" There was something in his tone that felt like a test. "He's an excellent boss. Very professional." "Professional," Richard repeated, amused. "Yes, Alexander does love his principles. Such a shame they get in the way of profit." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "If you ever find that idealism becomes problematic, my door is always open. I take care of people who understand how business really works." It wasn't an offer. It was a recruitment pitch. "I'll keep that in mind," I said, keeping my voice neutral. He smiled and walked away, leaving me standing there with my hands shaking. That night, I did something stupid. I stayed late at the office long after everyone else had gone home, and I broke into Richard Blackwood's office. Well, broke into is a strong term. I had access to most floors as Alexander's assistant, and Richard's office door wasn't locked. Still, it was a massive risk. I searched quickly and efficiently, looking for anything that might connect Richard to my father's company. Financial records, emails, memos, anything. What I found was worse than I'd imagined. Richard Blackwood had an entire system set up. He identified small companies with valuable patents or market share, then systematically destroyed them through predatory lawsuits, supplier manipulation, and strategic sabotage. Once they were desperate enough, Blackwood Corporation would swoop in with a generous acquisition offer that was really just theft. My father's company was on a list. So were dozens of others. But what made my blood run cold was finding my name. There was a file on me, a background check detailed and thorough that went back years. My father's suicide, my mother's breakdown, my education, my apartment address, even my social media accounts, and a note in Richard's handwriting, "Potential problem." "Watch closely," he knew. Richard Blackwood knew exactly who I was. "You shouldn't be in here." I spun around, my heart stopping. Alexander stood in the doorway, still in his suit despite the late hour, watching me with an unreadable expression. I was caught. Completely, utterly caught. I started, but he held up a hand. "Don't lie to me, Natalie." Or should I say Natalie Chen, daughter of Thomas Chen, whose company was destroyed by this corporation 2 years ago. My entire body went cold. "You know, I've known since the day you applied for the job." He stepped into the office, closing the door behind him. "Did you really think I don't thoroughly vet everyone who works for me? Especially someone who'll have access to everything I do? Then why did you hire me?" I demanded, my voice shaking with anger and fear. "Why let me get this close?" "Because you're right." He moved closer, his voice low and intense. "This company destroyed your father. But it wasn't me, Natalie. It was him." He gestured to his father's desk. "Richard Blackwood has been running a shadow operation within this corporation for years. While I'm focused on legitimate business, he's been doing this." He picked up one of the files I'd been looking at. Destroying families, stealing livelihoods, building an empire on other people's suffering. I stared at him, trying to process this. "You knew what he was doing?" I suspected. But he's careful. He keeps his operations separate, uses offshore accounts and shell companies. I've been trying to find evidence for years. He looked at me, and in his eyes I saw the same anger I felt. Then you showed up and I realized you might be the key to finally bringing him down. So you've been using me. The words came out bitter. Yes, he said simply. But not the way you think. I haven't been manipulating you, Natalie. I've been protecting you. Do you know what my father would do if he realized you were getting close to his operation? The file you found, he had you investigated because he suspected you might be a threat. If I hadn't convinced him that you were just an ambitious assistant who I barely trusted with anything important, he would have already made you disappear. Made me disappear? I repeated. You're saying he'd kill you? Maybe. Discredit you? Definitely. Ruin your life the way he ruined your father's? Absolutely. Alexander's jaw tightened. Richard Blackwood doesn't leave loose ends. I sank into one of the chairs, my legs suddenly weak. This was so much bigger than I'd thought. So much more dangerous. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Because you found his files. Because you're in too deep to back out safely. And because... He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration I'd never seen from him before. Because I'm tired of lying to you. Lying about what? He looked at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. About why I really wanted you close. About why I look for excuses to keep you working late. About why I... He stopped himself, shaking his head. This is complicated enough without adding that to it. My heart was pounding again, but for a completely different reason now. Adding what? Natalie. My name sounded different when he said it, softer, more real. You came here to destroy me. I let you stay to use your vendetta against my father. Neither of us expected... He gestured between us helplessly. This. There is no this, I said, but my voice was shaky. We're just lying to each other? He finished. Yes, we're excellent at that. He moved closer, and I should have stood up, should have put distance between us, but I couldn't move. But we're not lying about everything, are we? I knew what he meant. The way my pulse jumped when he walked into a room. The way I'd started noticing little things about him. How he took his coffee, the way he drummed his fingers on his desk when he was thinking. The rare smile that made him look years younger. The way he'd started finding excuses to touch my shoulder or hand when we worked late together. This is a bad idea, I whispered. The worst, he agreed. He was very close now. Close enough that I could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes. You hate my family. I'm using you to take down my father. We're both here under false pretenses. There are about 100 reasons why this shouldn't happen. So we shouldn't, he agreed. But God help me, Natalie, I'm going to anyway. He kissed me and the world tilted sideways. I should have pushed him away. Should have remembered why I was here, what I'd come to do. Should have remembered that this was Alexander Blackwood, the man whose family destroyed mine. But his hands were in my hair, and he was kissing me like I was air and he'd been drowning. And all I could think was that I'd been lying to myself as much as I'd been lying to him. Because somewhere in the past 3 weeks, in the late nights and early mornings, in the shared looks and almost touches, I'd fallen for the enemy. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing hard. This changes everything, I said, or nothing, he countered. Richard is still out there. He's still dangerous. And now, he touched my face gently. Now I have even more reason to protect you. I don't need protection. I need revenge. Then let's get it together. He stepped back, and just like that, he was all business again. Here's what I know. My father has been embezzling from the company for years, funneling money into his private operations. I've been building a case, but I need more evidence. Specifically, I need access to his offshore accounts. And you think I can help with that? I think he's already trying to recruit you. He approaches people he thinks might be useful, people who might be willing to bend the rules for the right price. If you play along, get close to his inner circle, you might be able to find what we need. It was dangerous, possibly insane. But I'd come here for revenge, hadn't I? What do you need me to do? Over the next 2 months, I became a double agent. To Richard Blackwood and his associates, I was the ambitious assistant who was getting tired of Alexander's naive idealism and might be interested in more lucrative opportunities. I attended dinners with Richard's friends, smiled at their inappropriate jokes, and pretended to be impressed by their stories of corporate conquest. It made me sick, but it also gave me access. To Alexander, I was his partner in every sense of the word. We worked together during the day, building his case against his father. At night, we were. Something else. Something that didn't have a name, yet but felt more real than anything I'd experienced before. "Tell me about your father," Alexander said one night. We were in his apartment, a stunning penthouse that he rarely seemed to enjoy, reviewing documents on his laptop while eating takeout Chinese food. I stiffened. "Why?" "Because you never talk about him. You talk about revenge, about justice, about bringing down my father, but you never talk about Thomas Chen, the person." I set down my chopsticks. "What do you want to know?" What was he like? Before all this? I hadn't talked about my father in 2 years. Not really talked about him. But with Alexander in the quiet safety of his apartment with city lights twinkling below us, the words started coming. "He was kind," I said. "Almost too kind for business, honestly. He believed in people. Believed they would do the right thing if you gave them the chance. When your father started the lawsuits, Dad kept thinking there must be some mistake, some misunderstanding. He couldn't imagine that someone would deliberately destroy him for profit. That kindness wasn't weakness," Alexander said quietly. "Try telling him that." The bitterness in my voice surprised me. He died thinking he was a failure, that he'd let everyone down. Your father didn't just take his business, Alexander. He took his sense of self-worth. "I'm sorry." He pulled me closer, and I let him. "If I could go back and stop it, but you can't. None of us can." I looked up at him. "All we can do is make sure he doesn't do it to anyone else." "We will," he promised. "I swear to you, Natalie, we'll stop him." A week later, Richard made his move. He invited me to lunch at an exclusive restaurant, just the two of us. Over expensive wine and steak I could barely taste, he laid out his proposition. "You're wasted as an assistant," he said. "You're smart, ambitious, and you understand how the world really works. I could use someone like you in my private investment division." "Private investment division?" I played dumb. "Let's not dance around it, my dear. You're not stupid, and neither am I. You've seen enough by now to know that I run certain operations that aren't part of the official corporate structure. High-risk, high-reward ventures that require discretion and moral flexibility." "I see. I pay very well. Better than my son ever would. And the opportunities for advancement." He smiled. "Let's just say your student loans would disappear overnight and that shabby apartment of yours could become a memory." He'd done his homework. He knew exactly where to apply pressure. "What would you need me to do?" I asked carefully. "For now, just keep your eyes open. Tell me what Alexander is working on, who he's meeting with, what he's planning." Richard leaned back in his chair. "My son has become difficult lately. He's developed some foolish notion about corporate ethics. I need to know if he's becoming a problem that requires handling." There it was, he wasn't just recruiting me, he was asking me to spy on his own son. "And if I say yes," I asked, "then you become part of the family, so to speak, protected, prosperous, powerful." His eyes glinted. "And if you say no?" The threat hung in the air, unspoken but clear. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Of course, but don't think too long." He signaled for the check. "Oh, and Natalie, I know who you are. I know your father was Thomas Chen. I know you came here looking for revenge." My blood turned to ice. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" Richard continued calmly. "I've been in this business for 40 years. I can spot a vendetta from a mile away." He leaned forward. "But here's what you need to understand, dear. Your father was weak. He couldn't adapt, couldn't compete, couldn't survive in the real world. What happened to him was natural selection, nothing more." Rage burned through me, hot and bright. I wanted to throw my wine in his face, wanted to scream the truth at him, but I forced myself to stay calm. "So why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I want you to understand your options clearly. You can keep playing detective with my son, gathering your little evidence, trying to avenge Daddy. And I will destroy you the same way I destroyed him." His smile was cold. "Or you can be smart. Join me. Profit from your father's failure instead of being consumed by it. His death can have meaning. It can be the moment you learned how the world really works. He stood up, dropping his napkin on the table. You have 48 hours to decide. Choose wisely. I sat there for 10 minutes after he left, shaking with fury and fear and a terrible, crushing realization. Richard Blackwood knew everything. He'd been playing with us this whole time. And if he knew about me, what else did he know? Did he know about Alexander's investigation about us? I pulled out my phone and texted Alexander. We need to talk. Now. We met at his apartment. I told him everything. The lunch, Richard's proposition, the threat. Alexander listened with growing tension in his jaw. He's escalating, Alexander said when I finished. That means we're close to something. He wouldn't show his hand like this unless he felt threatened. Or unless he's setting a trap, I pointed out. What if this is all part of his plan? What if he wanted me to tell you, wanted us to make a move so he can destroy both of us? It's possible, Alexander paced the room. But we don't have a choice anymore. He's given you 48 hours. We need to act now before he does. Act how? We still don't have enough evidence. Then we force his hand. Alexander turned to me, his expression grim. You're going to tell him yes. You're going to join his operation and you're going to get us what we need. That's insane. If he even suspects, he already suspects. He's been testing us both, seeing how far he can push. Alexander came to me, taking my hands. This is dangerous, I know that, but it's our only chance. What if it doesn't work? What if he... I couldn't finish the sentence. Then I'll protect you, whatever it takes. He pulled me close, and I could feel his heart racing as fast as mine. I won't let him hurt you, Natalie, I promise. You can't promise that. He's your father. He has resources, power. And I have something he doesn't. Alexander lifted my chin so I was looking into his eyes. I have something worth fighting for. We both knew what he meant. This had stopped being about revenge or justice or corporate crimes. Somewhere along the way, it had become about us. I'm scared, I admitted. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. He kissed my forehead. We can do this. Together. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life. I called Richard and accepted his offer. He sounded pleased, almost paternal, as he welcomed me to the family business. He set up a meeting for the following evening at a private office location, not Blackwood Corporation headquarters, but a nondescript building downtown. Come alone, he instructed. This is a very exclusive orientation. Alexander and I spent those 2 days preparing. He gave me a wire, a tiny device that looked like a button on my jacket. He positioned his security team around the building where I'd be meeting Richard. He went through every possible scenario, every risk, every backup plan. If anything feels wrong, you get out. He insisted for the 100th time. I don't care about the evidence, I care about you. I'll be fine, I said with more confidence than I felt. The night of the meeting, Alexander drove me to within a block of the location. This is it, I said, checking my reflection in the mirror. The wire was invisible. I looked calm, professional, ready. Inside, I was terrified. Natalie. Alexander grabbed my hand before I could get out of the car. If this goes wrong, it won't. But if it does, I need you to know. He struggled with the words. I need you to know that you changed everything for me. Before you, this company was just an obligation, a burden I carried because it was expected. But you reminded me why it matters, why fighting for what's right matters. Alexander, I love you. The words came out rushed, desperate. I know this is the worst possible timing, and I know we haven't known each other that long, but I love you, and I need you to come back to me. I kissed him hard and fierce, trying to pour everything I felt into it. I love you too, and I will come back. We're finishing this together. The building was quiet when I entered. Too quiet. My footsteps echoed on the marble floor as I followed the directory to the 5th floor. Richard was waiting in a conference room with 3 other men I didn't recognize. They all looked like him. Expensive suits, cold eyes, the kind of men who measured their worth in how many lives they'd ruined. Natalie. Richard gestured to a chair. Welcome, gentlemen, this is our new recruit. She comes highly recommended. The next hour was a surreal experience. They talked about their operations openly, almost proudly. Shell companies, insider trading, patent theft, blackmail. They had their hands in everything, and they'd been doing it for decades, and they were sloppy about it. Maybe it was arrogance, or maybe they just didn't see me as a threat, but they laid out their entire operation like they were giving a presentation at business school. I smiled and nodded and asked questions, and the whole time the wire under my jacket was recording everything. Now, Richard said, pulling out a folder, let's discuss your first assignment. My son has been conducting his own investigation into company finances. I need to know what he's found and who he's planning to share it with. You want me to spy on Alexander? I want you to protect our interests, Richard corrected smoothly. Alexander means well, but he doesn't understand the bigger picture. If he goes public with half-baked accusations, he could damage the company irreparably. We need to manage him. Manage him how? That depends on what he knows. Richard's smile didn't reach his eyes. Worst-case scenario, we might need to remove him from his position. The board can be convinced that he's unstable, that the pressure has gotten to him. It wouldn't be difficult to have him committed for psychiatric evaluation. My stomach turned. He was talking about having his own son institutionalized. You'd do that to him? I'd do whatever is necessary to protect what I've built. Richard leaned forward. That's what separates winners from losers, Natalie. Winners understand that sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. Your father never learned that lesson. Don't make the same mistake. Something in me snapped. All the planning, all the pretending, all the careful maneuvering, it evaporated in the face of his casual cruelty. My father, I said clearly, was worth 10 of you. The room went silent. I'm sorry. Richard's voice was dangerous. You heard me. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly in the quiet room. Thomas Chen was a good man who built something with his own hands, who treated his employees like family, who believed in doing the right thing. And you destroyed him because he had something you wanted. Not because he was weak. Because you're a monster. Richard's face darkened. Sit down. No. My fear was gone, replaced by 2 years of rage. You want to know what Alexander is planning? He's planning to send you to prison. We both are. Every word you've said tonight has been recorded. Every crime you've confessed to, every threat you've made, we have all of it. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Richard smiled. You think you're the first person to try to wear a wire into this room? Did you really believe I wouldn't check? Ice flooded my veins. Search her, Richard ordered. One of the men stood, but before he could take a step, the door burst open. Alexander strode in, flanked by 2 FBI agents and his head of security. Nobody touch her, he said, his voice lethal. FBI, everyone stay where you are. You're all under arrest. What followed was chaos. The men at the table tried to run, to fight, to argue, but more agents poured into the room, and within minutes they were all in handcuffs. All except Richard, who stood calmly as the agent read him his rights. You're making a mistake, he said to Alexander. I'm your father. You're a criminal, Alexander replied coldly. And you destroyed innocent people for profit, including the father of the woman I love. Richard's eyes flicked to me, then back to his son. So that's what this is about. You're choosing some girl over your own family? No. Alexander moved to stand beside me, taking my hand. I'm choosing right over wrong. Something you never taught me. As they led Richard away, he looked back one last time. You'll regret this, son. Both of you. I don't think so, Alexander said quietly. The aftermath took weeks to sort out. The FBI investigation uncovered decades of crimes. Richard Blackwood and his associates were facing hundreds of charges. The board of directors was dissolved, and Alexander had to rebuild the company from the ground up, separating the legitimate business from his father's criminal operations. It was exhausting, overwhelming, and sometimes heartbreaking, but we did it together. 3 months later, I stood in front of the building that used to house my father's factory. It had been abandoned since the company went under, slowly falling into disrepair. What are you thinking? Alexander asked, standing beside me. I'm thinking about telling him, I said, about how we won, about how the man who destroyed him is going to prison, about how his death wasn't meaningless after all. It was never meaningless, Alexander squeezed my hand. Your father built something real, He raised a daughter strong enough to fight back. That matters. I wish he could have met you, I said. The real you, not the person I thought you were. I wish I could have met him. Alexander pulled me closer. I would have told him that his daughter is the most remarkable person I've ever known, that she brought down an empire to protect people she'll never meet, that she made me want to be better than I was. I leaned into him, letting myself feel the weight of everything that had happened. The grief, the anger, the fear, but also the love, the victory, the hope. So what now? I asked. Now? Alexander turned me to face him. Now we rebuild. The company, our lives, everything. We do it right this time. We create something your father would have been proud of. That's a nice thought, I said. But I'm not sure I can work at Blackwood Corporation anymore. Too many memories. Too much history. What if it wasn't called Blackwood Corporation anymore? I looked at him surprised. What? I've been thinking about this for a while. He pulled out his phone and showed me a document. I want to rename the company. Start fresh. And I want you to help me lead it. Not as my assistant, as my partner, co-CEO, equal say in every decision. Alexander, I can't. Why not? You're brilliant, you're fearless, and you understand what this company should stand for better than anyone. He smiled. Plus, I'm pretty sure I can't run it without you. I've gotten used to you anticipating everything I need. That was my job. It stopped being just a job a long time ago, and we both know it. He was right. Somewhere between revenge and justice, between lies and truth, between hate and love, everything had changed. What would we call it? I asked. I was thinking Chen Blackwood Industries. He watched my reaction carefully. Your father's name comes first. His legacy, his values, that's what we build on. My family's resources, but his principles. What do you think? I couldn't speak for a moment. The idea of my father's name on a building again, of his memory being honored instead of forgotten, it was almost too much. I think, I said slowly, that he would have liked that. And I think he would have liked you. Even though I'm a Blackwood, you're not just a Blackwood. You're the Blackwood who chose to do the right thing even when it cost you everything. It didn't cost me everything. He pulled me closer, his forehead touching mine. It gave me everything. It gave me you. We stood there for a long moment, in front of the ruins of my father's factory, planning a future neither of us had imagined possible 6 months ago. There's one more thing, Alexander said. My father's trial starts next month. You'll have to testify. It won't be easy. I know. I'd been preparing for it, working with the prosecutors, going over every detail of what I'd witnessed. But I'm ready. I want to look him in the eye and tell the truth about what he did. He'll try to destroy you on the stand. His lawyers will dig into your past, question your motives, try to make you look like you were just out for revenge. Let them, I said, because yes, I wanted revenge. I wanted justice for my father and for every other person Richard Blackwood destroyed. But I also wanted the truth to come out. I wanted people to know what really happened. That's not something to be ashamed of. Alexander smiled. That's my girl. Your girl, your partner, your co-CEO, I corrected. You're getting a package deal here. Best deal I ever made. The trial was brutal. Richard Blackwood's defense team was everything Alexander had warned me about. They attacked my credibility, suggested I'd seduced Alexander to gain access to the company, implied that I'd fabricated evidence out of grief and rage, but I held my ground. Yes, I came to Blackwood Corporation seeking revenge, I testified clearly. My father killed himself because of what Richard Blackwood did to him. I wanted someone to pay for that. But what I found was so much worse than one man's vendetta. I found a systematic pattern of corporate crime spanning decades. Dozens of families destroyed, hundreds of lives ruined, all for profit. I looked directly at Richard as I spoke. He stared back, impassive, but I could see the calculation in his eyes. He was still looking for a way out, still convinced his power would protect him. My father was a good man who believed in people, I continued. Richard Blackwood took advantage of that goodness. He used my father's trust against him, destroyed his life's work and drove him to despair. And he did it without remorse, without hesitation, because to him, people like my father were just obstacles to be removed. Objection, Richard's lawyer called out. The witness is editorializing. Overruled, the judge said. The witness may describe her observations. I took a breath. When I recorded Richard Blackwood confessing to decades of crimes, he was proud of what he'd done. He bragged about it. He called my father weak for having principles. He threatened to have his own son institutionalized for trying to expose the truth. My voice cracked slightly. That's not business. That's not competition. That's evil. The courtroom was silent. We walked back through the office, past the conference rooms where we'd make tomorrow's decisions, past the cubicles where employees were packing up for the night, past the reception desk where my father's photo hung on the wall, not as a memorial to what was lost, but as a reminder of what we were building. Thomas Chen, 1965-2023, the plaque read, Founder, Father, Inspiration. Good night, Dad, I whispered as we passed, and I swear, just for a moment, I felt him smile. The end. 2 years later, epilogue, the Way, small factory in Pennsylvania was nothing like Blackwood Corporation headquarters had been. It was modest, practical, a single-story building with a parking lot that needed repaving and windows that could use a good cleaning. It was also the first company Chen Blackwood Industries had helped save instead of acquire. Mr. Torres, I said, shaking hands with the owner. Thank you for meeting with us. Ms. Chen, Mr. Blackwood. Torres looked nervous. I have to admit, when you said you wanted to visit, I thought it was the beginning of the end. Companies like yours don't visit companies like mine unless they're planning to shut us down. We're not here to shut you down, Alexander assured him. We're here to help you compete. Over the next hour, we toured the factory. It reminded me so much of my father's place that I had to keep blinking back tears. The same smell of machine oil and metal, the same dedicated workers who'd been there for decades, the same owner who knew every employee's name and asked about their kids. You're being squeezed by larger competitors, I said when we sat down in Torres's cramped office. They're using the same tactics Richard Blackwood used. Predatory pricing, supplier manipulation, frivolous lawsuits. They want to drive you under so they can buy your patents for pennies. Torres nodded wearily. I know, my lawyers say I can't afford to fight them. They're recommending I sell now before I lose everything. Don't, Alexander said. Fight back. And let us help you. Why would you help me? Torres asked suspiciously. What's in it for you? I pulled out a folder. Chen Blackwood Industries has established a fund specifically for situations like yours. We provide legal support, financial backing, and strategic advice to small companies being targeted by larger competitors using illegal tactics. We don't want equity. We don't want control. We just want to level the playing field. There has to be a catch. No catch, I said, except that if you succeed, we'd like you to pay it forward someday. Help the next company that faces what you're facing. Build a network of businesses that support each other instead of destroying each other. Torres stared at us for a long moment. Why are you really doing this? Alexander and I exchanged glances. Because someone should have done it for my father, I said quietly. And because we can. And because if we don't use our resources to fight against the Richard Blackwoods of the world, then what's the point of having them? Torres's eyes were wet. Your father would be proud. I hope so, I said. I really hope so. As we drove back to the city that evening, Alexander reached over and took my hand. Happy? He asked. I thought about it. About my father gone but not forgotten. About my mother finally smiling again. About the company we'd built from the ashes of the one that had destroyed my family. About the man beside me who I'd once hated and now loved beyond measure. Yeah, I said. I think I am. Are you? More than I ever thought possible. He brought my hand to his lips. You know what the best part is? What? We're just getting started. He was right. There were dozens more companies like Torres's out there. Hundreds of families facing what mine had faced. Thousands of people who needed someone to fight for them the way we'd fought for each other. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was something better. It was justice. It was purpose. It was love. It was everything my father had believed in, brought to life in a way he never got to see. And as we drove into the sunset, past the building that still bore his name, I finally felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Peace. Come the end.